Morning. These are just some quick thoughts I was having as I was driving the kids to school this morning. I was thinking about how, as a Thana doula, it feels really important that my attitude toward death and my feelings about death are serene and tranquil and accepting. Because most of the other kind of Thana doulas are people in the field of death education and passage guidance and legacy creation. They all seem to be pretty zen, and the qualities that I've kind of always attempted to maintain and cultivate and engender in myself as often as possible. And I think I've kind of had a life focus on equanimity because, well, maybe because I fear emotions, but mostly because it's just a really nice homeostatic place to be in, where maybe the bus comes, maybe the bus doesn't, it's all the same. It's just a walk or a ride, doesn't matter. Kind of Buddhist kind of state of existence. But a few things in the past year or so have kind of really brought light to my relationship with death and made it clear that even the tranquility and equanimity and those things are ideal, especially in someone who's working with people who are actively dying or planning on dying or thinking about death of themselves or loved ones. It feels really important to cultivate that state, but I feel like more than I've kind of spent a life striving for equanimity and balance, I've really discovered over and over again, and I mean from a very young age. I started journaling probably around 5 or 6. It's really obnoxious when someone's like, "Oh, I know what I wanted to be from birth," but I feel pretty lucky that I might be counted among one of those people. I knew I wanted to be a writer as early as I can remember, and I kept a diary as early as I can remember, and took notes as early as I can remember, making lists and all kinds of things. And in reading those notes then, and in my writing practice now, it's very clear that authenticity is more of a goal for me than equanimity or tranquility or serenity or acceptance or any of those things. And so I want to be honest. I want to be authentic when I tell you that I am terrified of dying, and I can hardly bear to think of my loved ones dying. I almost immediately find myself desperate to bury it, or to put on music and distract myself, or to write through it and distance myself from it. Never writing in first person, never writing the name of my children in the same sentence of death, or the name of my partner, or the name of my closest friends in the same sentence as the word death, but always kind of third person, distancing myself from it, making it into a story that isn't happening to me, and that might not happen to me, that could happen, And I realize that I need to be honest about that in this field, in this work, that I am terrified of dying and I'm not comfortable with it, and I haven't accepted it. A lot of times, the people that we work with are actively dying or have been given a diagnosis of a fatal diagnosis. And they're in that place where there isn't a lot of choice but to find some sort of calm, because no one wants to die panicking. No one wants to die falling apart the entire time, from the moment from the moment you take your last breath. That's not ideal. And I think there's something in the human spirit and in our biology that won't allow for that over an extended period of time. I've observed in my sitting with death and with the dying that there is a point where the body goes into a kind of shock. And this is pre-shutting down. This is pre-loss of coherence and cognizance. The body kind of goes into an almost automatic state of, I wouldn't say calm or peace, but of acceptance. I think the first few times I observed it, it felt like a sort of shock. In one of my near-death experiences, my car accident, they were cutting me out of the car using the jaws of life, and I remember sensations of some sort. I remember feeling cold, and I remember knowing that there was rain on my skin. And I remember the paramedic. Sorry, I've dropped the kids off at school, and so I'm probably gonna be a little dreamy and off on tangents because I've been looking at the leaves changing, and I'm in a semi-state of autumnal bliss. But I remember I was in West Virginia coming down a hill near Harper's Ferry, and a neighbor had heard the crash and come running out. And they had put plastic, a kind of tarp plastic over me because they needed to cut me out and there would be glass flying everywhere. And they wanted to prevent any further kind of damage. And so this neighbor was allowed to kind of stick her head into the tarp to comfort me. And she was crying hysterically. And she kept telling me that she had a daughter my age, and I must have been in my mid-20s, maybe late 20s. And she said she had a daughter my age, and she couldn't imagine. And Libra that I am, I felt the need to comfort her and tell her it was going to be okay. And one of my pathologies is abusing humor to cope. Not using, abusing, actually. Having to make a joke, sometimes at my own expense, but I tell myself it's because I don't like conflict and discomfort. So I was kind of calming her down and saying, well, don't worry, I'll meet your daughter one day and I'll tell her how much you care about her. And, I was thanadooling even back then, and planning to create her legacy for her as I lay dying. And at some point her voice began to hit a register that was unbearable. As much as she was trying to comfort me, and as much as I was trying to comfort her in return, her voice started doing this thing that I couldn't bear. And along with that, under her voice, she had this really airy kind of tone. It was like just a hissing, like a villain in The Jungle Book, just a hissing sound. And as she was sheer conning it into my ear, I realized I couldn't bear it, and I was suffering a bit from it, and I was able to deal with it, put my need to make peace and create harmony aside long enough to say, I'm sorry, could you're making a hissing sound, do you mind? And the man, one of the emergency workers who was cutting me out, was able to hear me saying that, and he came in under the tarp and he said, that hissing sound is the air leaving your lungs. I would conserve it as much as possible by not talking. I'd also give her your last wishes. I would tell her to write some stuff down. And I don't know that reality set in at that moment, and I don't know that I felt fear or terror, but I know that my body got down to the business of conserving either its last moments or the moments it would need to recover in future. And there was real clarity in that. I know that I had the thought, don't panic. You will lose more air. But it wasn't a thought that I conjured. It was just there. Automatically, the moment he said that was there. Do not panic. I didn't have children. I was desperate for them at that point in my life. So I know it was late 20s, maybe early 30s even. And that was it. A switch flipped, and there was, I can't say calm or peace, but there was understanding of what needed to happen for whatever was going to happen next. Okay, bring it back to your point. So I find that there was kind of an automatic acceptance in those moments. Not always, of course. There are some people who die begging for their lives and pleading for mercy and another chance in 5 more minutes, and of course. But in general, I think with kind of a lack of being actively tortured or a lack of active, horrifying suffering, unnatural causes, I think that there can be a certain click, a flip of the switch. That aside, I want to talk about, and I'm trying to focus on talking about, my lack of being able to accept the death of myself and loved ones. And there's a few key things that are really clear to me. I do not have resolution with my children and what happens to them next. My sons, who are conceived by a donor, I feel like their destiny has always been a bit in flux, and I don't feel confident or comfortable about what will happen to them. Legally, whatever the case may be, I worry about what happens to them next. Emotionally, how will they be loved? How much will they be loved? Will they be loved in the way that I love them? Of course not. Never, ever. But will it even come close? Will someone, my partner, my friends, my relatives, will they understand how much love they need and how much that love has to change and pay attention and adapt and constantly rejuvenate itself by looking into their faces and realizing how vulnerable and fragile and strong and beautiful they are, because they really are perfect to me. All the cliches about a mother's love seem really, really shaky compared to what I know I feel. 2 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon, and watching them walk toward me and watching them refuse to clean their rooms, all of it. It's unbearable, genuinely unbearable. My love for them is almost as unbearable as the thought of death, and I know there's a connection there, but there are times when I look at them and I think, this is unbearable. There was a time when my first son was born, who I wanted more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. Me, who never wanted kids. When the fever hit, it hit. And I remember when he was born thinking, I can't go anywhere now. This is it. I can't. There are no other options. And I know I had a bit of postpartum, but I remember really clearly thinking that with the birth package, diapers and formula that I wasn't going to use, and instructions for breastfeeding, and the number of a lactation consultant, and, you know, all kinds of coupons for photographers and other people, you know, often taking advantage of new moms and their need to capture every moment and to preserve everything. Along with that package, I thought, irrationally, I realize now, but maybe not, that I wish there were a cyanide pill in that package, because if anything happened, I couldn't be on earth for a moment without him. I needed to follow him into whatever was next, even if it was nothing, even if it was the ground, which I do believe it is. I needed to follow him into the earth. I needed to be beside him. Didn't matter if I had any cognizance or, if we just became worm food. I wanted to become worm food together with him immediately. I wanted that process to begin with us together in the same place. And as mad as that sounds, I don't know that I've stopped feeling that way. I do not have the capability yet to imagine a moment without them. Any of my 3. So again, this isn't very Thanadula talk. This isn't maybe the most comforting thing to hear for someone who might want me at their bedside or with their family as they're dying. But I want to put forth that it might be the best possible way to feel about death, because I think when I've sat with people who are dying, I think it allows, empathy is such an overused word, but I just think it allows me to sit with them and not just hold space, which is really important, just holding space without injecting myself into that space. But it allows for me to bear witness fully. And for me, bearing space, holding space, isn't just about allowing them to exist exactly as they need to, or exactly as they feel or think or see things. But it allows for me to bear witness in a way that allows them to feel as if their moments that they're going through matter. They're being observed, they're being witnessed. I know a lot of my life, I was the only one in the room, the only one of my kind, in many ways. My brother always jokes that I should find one more minority or marginalized group to belong to, because I feel like I kind of cover all of them. But growing up, I felt lonely a lot. Even surrounded by people, I felt like I didn't have really anyone to understand and kind of fully comprehend, because there wasn't anyone really like me in more than maybe one way at a time. There were women, there were queer people, there were people of color, there were non-believers, but never all at once. There were hippies, never all at once. And so a lot of times, even if I was in a room full of people, or people were interested or observing me, they weren't observing me with the same, with a shared value system, or with a shared vision, or with a shared understanding of how life is from the inside out, or even from the outside in, really. And I remember from a very young age having watchers, that's what I called them, imagining that there were people watching me. And I've had this conversation with my best friend, Kara, and she says, yeah, I had them too. And it's interesting, her watchers were always testing her to see if she was worthy, if she was strong enough, if she were up to her tasks, if she were clever enough and brave enough. And that is exactly who she is. Her observers are a manifestation of her own way of seeing herself. She is always testing herself against her own courage and strength and bravery and competence. And she passes all the time, every time. But my watchers were writers like me. They were taking notes and creating stories and creating narrative. Whether what was happening to me was good or bad, they were the narrative creators, the narrative framers. Which is what I consider myself to be very much in real life from a very young age. And so these observers, these watchers, these narrators of my life story were important because they saw me and they were interested in seeing me. And these invisible watchers, these imaginary and yet very real watchers, held space in a way, witnessed me in a way that validated my existence and my suffering and my joy. I didn't have that outside of my parents and maybe a few friends. And it was really valuable. And I find that the friendships I've created and sought out, the tribe that I've not met but recognized since childhood, have very much had the same qualities that these imaginary watchers had when I was a kid. They're interested in observing and in paying attention and in kind of recording the details for not just edification or entertainment, but because they're just curious. I'm a story they want to read. My life is a story they're curious about. Sometimes just as it relates to their own, or as it relates to the human condition, or the human experience, or our shared consciousness, or our human collective, being. But either way, they're the friends and tribe I've created and chosen are very similar to these watchers. And I think I too try and embody those characteristics. And so when I'm sitting with people who are dying, or friends, or anyone really, I take on those qualities of someone witnessing with interest, with curiosity, with love, and with something akin to need isn't the word, want isn't the word, desire isn't the word, but a combination of those three, something there. I'm curious about humans. I really am, and I always have been. I like the things that we have in common, and I love the things we don't. I love the things that make us similar, and I love the things that make us as individuals, our fingerprints. And in sitting with the dying, and the tribe of the dying, it's an amazing opportunity to share humanity and to see the differences in humanity. I'm so far off track right now. Sorry, I love this stuff, and it always takes me. down different paths. So to come back to what I think my original point was, I'm terrified of dying. And I think that helps me deal with dying better. For myself, for the people that I'm working with. Because it can be a really scary thing to imagine not ceasing to exist, because that's it. I remember the car accident right after, just realizing that this is it. There isn't anything that flashes before your eyes unless you're really lucky and have time to kind of think about it. It's just it. It's one moment. It's one cartoonish slip of your hand on the wheel and a veering toward the mountain and a thought, what? Or this is just like a cartoon, or this is just like a video game, or something's happening here that I have no control over. Nothing clever or witty or, I'm no Dorothy Parker. In that moment, I was not the Dorothy Parker I hoped I'd be. There were no witty Algonquin table one-liners. It was just, okay, wow, this is unreal and very real at the same time. And so realizing that there isn't any kind of beautiful death other than that we create before we die, that we plan for. I think it helps to allow that fear and that repulsion and strong reaction to death to inform the way that we plan for it now. And I think that if I wasn't afraid of death, and if I didn't have such unresolved feelings about my death or the death of my loved ones, I wouldn't be so motivated to encourage legacy creation while we're alive. And my partner and I, as part of Embracing Daisies, the End-Powered Path, a lot of our focus is on preparing for death now, while we're wildly alive and vibrating with life and ensure that it will last for a long time. Now is the moment, because I'm not so good when I'm scared. The clarity isn't always there. And so being afraid of death is what makes me so hungry to help people living create a plan for it moving forward. My terror of dying and my fear of losing my children, or of my children losing me, is what motivates me to pick up the camera and interview them as often as possible, and to ask them questions, and to make videos detailing how I feel about them and what I wish for them. One of my favorite parts of our of what our company is creating is the Growing Path book, which is hopefully coming soon. But it's the book in which we create videos for our children. It's two moms telling their children what they wish and dream for them. And it came about as a result of when we had our launch for the business. We had a family over, and one of the questions we asked, we had a lot of activities and kind of people thinking about and talking about death and dying, and kind of maybe for the first time coming to terms with what it meant for them and what they dreamed and what they hoped for in terms of creating the most beautiful death allowed or available. And surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, one of the questions was, what do you think you'll take from this? What is your heart telling you right now? What do you want to do most? What do you wish for most right now, having kind of listened to this presentation and talk about death and dying and how important it is to plan for it and to find support for it through it? And my partner spoke up and said, right now, more than anything, I want to go home, and I want to talk to the kids about not just our lives now, but he said, imagine if we die. Imagine if I died today. Our children are they're not teenagers yet. None of them are teenagers yet. The youngest one is 3. And my partner thought, if I die in a year, who I am to them now will have mattered, of course. And it's important that I show them my love now. But what about when they're 16? What about when they're 21? At their wedding? Should they choose to have one? At their graduations? At the birth of their first child? When they begin to approach the age I am now and think, I'm not going to live forever for the first time. What can I do now to stay with them whether or not I die? Even then, to be there, whether or not I die, in a week, what can I do to be there for them throughout all of their kind of milestones and moments that are important, where they would like maybe to have my voice or to hear what I think? And that is the relationship that we kind of cultivate with our children. Is we love the way they think, and we love to kind of hear what they think, and I don't know if they love it, but we're always sharing what we think with them. There's a lot of communication. We're a family of readers and talkers. Our family crest would be, let's talk about it. Let's read together in silence in a room, and then talk about it. But out of him saying that, we kind of, my partner and I, Donna and I, my work partner and I, begin to create this book, where we're kind of creating videos and ways for parents to leave legacy for their children, whether or not their death is sooner or later. And it is, in fact, his fear of death and my fear of death that engendered this idea that being afraid of dying can be the best motivation for dying well. Being terrified of loss is perhaps the best motivation for preparing for loss well, and not just holistically, but comprehensively. We started out with, let's do 10 videos for our kids. Why I love you, what I love about you, story of your birth, my dreams for you, my dreams for us together. And that was maybe the first couple of days. We were so excited. 10 questions, 10 questions, 10 videos. The book is written questions and videos to produce, that we help you produce, and then this book exists, goes in your fire safe, and your children will have this forever. Your words, your hopes, your dreams. We really feel excited about this book. And so we thought, 10 videos, maybe 10 questions will be good. Within 3 weeks, we had 100 questions. We had 50 videos, because the hunger is there to let our loved ones know how we love them, how much we love them, in what ways we love them, what we love in them, what we love about them, what we think when we think about them, the emotions and feelings and films and soundtracks they conjure up in us. Without my terrible fear of death and loss, the questions wouldn't have come so quickly in rapid fire, and there wouldn't be so many. And so, in closing, because this could go on forever, I just want to say that I'm not tranquil when I think about death and loss. I don't feel serenity. I feel something akin to desperation. But it's a hopeful one. And it's a desperation that motivates me to plan now for a beautiful death. And for a loss that has ways to cope at the ready. There isn't any way I can imagine being okay with my children's death or my loved ones' deaths. I don't know that I can imagine my children being okay with my death. I don't think anyone wants to imagine that, but and I do eventually hope that they are. But I hope that they are because I've created a legacy and an ongoing communication and an ongoing understanding for them of who I am and how much I love them, loved them one day. And it's only the wild terror I feel that allows me to calmly now prepare for what comes next or what may come next. And so I just want to say that if you plan on hiring Donna and I, or if you plan on hiring anyone that works for us or works with us to be with you in your last moments, or to plan for your last moments, or for your loved one's last moments, I want to be honest that we're scared of it. We haven't accepted it or come to terms with it. It's that. It is that terror and that fear that will make us, hopefully, good people to have on your team. Good people to have as your support system. Because us and our authentic and honest selves understand that it's not always about rising above. Sometimes it's about moving through. It's not always about transcending. Sometimes it's about sitting in that moment and holding on. And the best way that I know how to do that is to prepare for it now. Is to create as many things to hold on to as possible. To create as many stepping stones that will allow us to move through. On the ground, grounded, not rising above, not trees to climb or parachutes to, or, hot air balloons to float away in. But stepping stones that will help us move through that thick, dark, unknowable, frightening, perhaps comforting, perhaps at times peaceful forest. So yeah, I'd love to be your Thanadula. I'd love to sit with you and share our own education and knowledge and ideas about death. And I'm terrified. I'm scared. And you probably are too. But I look forward to being scared with you and to being motivated with you to not alleviate those fears, but to put those fears into action, into creating a beautiful death and a beautiful after death for our loved ones that maybe allows them to feel peace now and again. That's me this morning. Those are my thoughts. I'm motivated right now thinking about it to, make some videos for the kids and loved ones. Anyway, that's me this morning. This might just be a video for me. I think I rambled way too much for anyone else to stick with it, to sit through it. But yeah, good morning. Here's to a beautiful life and a beautiful death.